It's so like common that budgeting is tied to some sort of feeling of deprivation of I can't spend, I'm on a budget, I can't do what I want. But in reality, it's just knowledge about where your money's going. And I like to add to that, ensuring that you're spending your money in line with your values and your priorities.
What if there are things we never had the opportunity to learn? We've all been to school or training, but there are things they never taught us that actually make a powerful difference in life. I'm here to share with you all the pieces you've been missing: mindset, health, success, and more. And we'll all learn together from guests along the way. We may not have learned it the traditional way, but oh my goodness, let's keep learning how to do things differently. OMG, hello, my friends. We are starting a two-part series today on money. And if my saying the word money strikes fear into your heart, then you are in the right place, because we're going to make it so much better than that, I promise. So today we're going to talk about budgeting, and I have a guest expert to help us learn about that. And here's the thing with money, and this is why I think it deserves two podcast episodes. It's not really taught in school how to budget, how to deal with your income and life and all the different priorities. And they're starting to try, to be fair. In my state, they're starting to try with high school econ classes and personal finance, but sometimes at that age, it's too hard to grasp. So it's almost like we need a class out of school once we have a family or whenever we have a life change. So maybe this will be that class. We're going to start with the basics today, and that's a budget. Where does our money go, and what should we do about that? My guest is Katie Van Wyngarden, and she is a financial planner with Fearless Finance. And Katie says that she is a self-proclaimed finance nerd from a young age and knows all about aspects of personal finance and helps people to apply those aspects to their lives. She believes in a few really important principles: spend less than you earn, give your excess money a job, I like that, and spend according to your personal values. And we're definitely going to talk about that today. And so using the Fearless Finance Proven Process, which is the company that she works with, Katie's able to take the mystery out of your finances to give you relevant financial guidance based on your goals and values. She specializes in helping women who are just starting out on their finance journey. She's originally from Seattle, has degrees in accounting and finance from Washington State University, and she was a tax accountant for 14 years prior to joining Fearless Finance. So just to make sure that she also loves to do fun stuff, we know she also enjoys traveling, cooking, gardening, and cheering on the WSU Cougars. I love that introduction. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and be a part of this.
Yes, I'm happy to have you. And I am really excited about talking about this topic, actually, because it's so important. And I think it sort of, as I said in the beginning, it kind of strikes fear into our hearts sometimes to understand how to deal with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people just take the mindset of, kind of the ostrich mindset where I have enough to pay my bills and I'll just bury my head in the sand for everything else. And there's so much more opportunity that people can take for their finances with just a little bit of knowledge and kind of a personal touch that can take them so far in life. So that's what I love to do and work with people one-on-one to make finances less scary, because it's not.
I love it. I love it. I happen to be married to an accountant, so it's been drilled into me for many years that finances are not scary. But had that not been the case, I feel I might have fallen into that as well.
We are a special breed for sure.
So let's start with this. I always want to know people's stories because I think that it makes your experience and your knowledge relevant for us. And we always find kind of common ground as well. So tell us a little bit about your experience and how and why you became a financial planner.
Yeah, so kind of getting started even as a young kid, I was lucky enough that my dad was really into finance and money and he shared some of his knowledge and experience with me through middle school and high school at, kind of an age appropriate level. But as I went through college and learned a lot in college about personal finance or the finance world that I knew I didn't want to do, that institutional finance, kind of what most people think about, I started to dive in a little bit more to what I did like with personal finance and, read blogs in my free time and all of the stuff that makes me the money nerd that I am, and decided to pick accounting to go, into the actual workforce, and just because I didn't feel like the finance world that I was taught about fit me. But I was I was always the one who friends would get a new job and they'd come ask me about what should I do with my 401k, or I
Right.
need to, how do I pay off debt early, or what credit card should I pick? And so I was just, offering people advice one on one, or, random people walking down the street, that kind of stuff. And I was like, I'd love to be able to figure out a way to get paid for this, but there's all this other stuff that I don't want to do, selling insurance and kind of that traditional financial planning role. And so I found Fearless Finance, who's founded by a woman who believes a lot of the same things about making financial planning accessible for everyone, and was so excited to be able to figure out a way to make this my job, that I get to work with individuals, help them understand finances, and then implement that into their day-to-day lives and have their finances support the life that they're trying to build. So it's, just very much from I loved doing it and how do I get paid for it? And now I finally have figured that out and just am loving talking about it with everyone.
I like how you said that. I loved doing it. How do I get paid for it? Good heavens, I feel like so many of us are asking ourselves that question
Mm-hmm.
in life, right? I mean, yours
Absolutely.
is a very, very practical love, which is lucky for you, but even still, you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out exactly how it would fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the accounting piece that I started with, I still practice that kind of on the side and keep my skills up, because it is such a relevant piece of what I do in my financial planning job as well. But that was a great career for 14 or 15 years. But I was always talking to my tax people about their personal finances too. And my job would be like, hey, no, you're straying out of your lane. Get back into what you're an expert for. So this has just been kind of a natural progression that has really fallen into place and become just a great opportunity for me. So I'm so glad to get to be on different podcasts and get to interact with other professionals in the area and share that knowledge.
Yeah, I love that. I love when we can combine what we enjoy doing and also really have personal evidence that we make a difference for people. It's
Mhm.
it's a powerful thing to be able to see that personally.
Yes. Yeah, where all that kind of comes together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right. So then let's dive into the numbers, so to speak. So, budgeting. Budgeting might seem, as I was saying, like a big scary word to some people. And I'm sure we have others listening who are like, budgeting, that's easy. I love it. I do it all the time. But for some people, it's scary. So, if we're wanting to start having a budget, what's really the goal of budgeting? How does it help us?
So, budgeting shouldn't be a scary word for people. The root of it is figuring out where your money is going. It's so like common that budgeting is tied to some sort of feeling of deprivation, of I can't spend, I'm on a budget, I can't do what I want. But in reality, it's just knowledge about where your money's going. And I like to add to that, ensuring that you're spending your money in line with your values and your priorities. So it's really just making sure that you know and are clear how your money is being spent on a regular basis.
So it's not about berating ourselves about how much we spend on something. It's more about having a correct picture of everything.
Yes, yes. And bringing clarity and light to that, to your regular spending. Absolutely.
I like that angle a lot because you're right. When you hear, oh, you need to have a budget, you need to make a budget, it feels like, oh, I need to stop spending money. It's more
Mhm.
about knowing and understanding.
Yes, I know. And often when I bring that up, even just the word budget, it seems like the most common response I get from people is they get defensive about their Starbucks habit. And I always say, no, if Starbucks is important to you, and I am currently drinking a Starbucks right now,
Yes, listeners, I confirm she is.
Yep. Then keep that in your budget. Keep spending. Take that moment and go into Starbucks and smell the smell and feel all the good feelings that it brings. It's not about trying to live a life on spending as little money as possible. It's about trying to use your finances to support the life that you're trying to build. And the first step to that is bringing some clarity to how you're spending your money currently.
I like this perspective a lot. And the next question I was going to ask you, we're kind of already talking about, but maybe we can take it a little bit further. I was going to ask, what do we learn about ourselves when we go through this process? And how could it maybe be empowering as opposed to the opposite?
I think there's kind of a twofold approach that people need to take. I think the first thing that you need to do, and this is something I've seen in some of your podcasts, is get really clear about what you want your life to be, the life that you're trying to build. Is it a life that's full of health and fitness and strength? Physical strength? Is it a life full of people and camaraderie and friendships and family that are really important to you? Is it a life built for the work that you're so passionate about? Kind of figure out some priorities, put those in order of what's most important and what's least important to you. There's no right answer here. It's really just about getting in touch with yourself, and some of these back episodes from this fabulous podcast can help you with that.
I didn't even plan you to say that.
So that you really do know yourself. And then the second piece is to look at your monthly spending. And it doesn't have to be, a deep down dive into every dollar you spent last year. Start with the last 30 days or the last month, in our case, the month of August. And just take a look at your credit card, take a look at your checking account, and kind of put things in categories. There's some regular things you spend on: rent, mortgage, utilities, car, those kinds of things. Just put it down all on paper with no judgment. And then once you have both of those pieces of information, your values and goals and where your money went for that period, do they line up? If your value in life is health and wellness, but your fast food budget is maybe $500 last month, does that really align? Or would you rather spend $500 on that new rock climbing gym that you're super excited about, or getting an Apple Watch to be able to track, your heart rate and fitness levels and sleep and recovery and all of those things? Like, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So is that where you want your money to go? And there's no right answer. This is all your choice. And so if you do decide that, nope, I'm okay with that, and I can figure out how to make those two work in sync going forward, that's just fine. But it provides an easy way for you to maybe kick that McDonald's habit that isn't so healthy for you. Or if your priority is spending time with family and friends, really lots of time for those extroverts, especially out there, and you see that you're eating out entertainment, going out to bars, that kind of expense is like $500 or $750 in a month. To you, that may be totally worth it, and go for it. You're working on relationships, you're building connections, you're maybe moving along a career, things like that. Like, that's absolutely in line, even though some traditional financial rules of thumb will tell you, no, that's too much to spend eating out. Know yourself and choose to, pay less for cable and some of those introverting things that isn't who you are, so that you can afford to have more time with people.
Yeah, this is a great method, I think, and not the way I learned it. So I love that, because that's what we're here for. And it's interesting because you're right, there are sort of rules of thumb, I feel like, that people might have heard of how much of your income should be for your housing and how much should be for your food and how much should be for your entertainment. But I often say in various instances that we should stop shoulding on ourselves and get rid of the word should. And
Absolutely.
that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes,
There's
100%.
no should.
Yep. Being confident in what you want out of life and what you're doing, and knowing that you're making, the right choices for you where you're at right now, is huge in giving yourself the permission to live a life that fulfills you and, aligns with those goals and values, and using your finances to then support that life. So I have a friend here that she's in her 40s, she's single, makes a whole lot of money, but chooses to live in a house with a couple of roommates because she is the extroverted extrovert that I have ever met. and she is never at home. And so she's like, why would I pay 3 times as much to live by myself and I'm never at home anyway? She's like, I roll in, I sleep, I get up and I go to work. I'm just never there. And because of that, she loves to donate and give back to her community. So she's able to donate. She travels extensively and is really living a fulfilling life. And yet people, stereotypically would judge her for her choice. And she owns it unapologetically.
I love that, and I'm impressed by her. And it's interesting because about 3 years ago, my husband and I downsized from a big house with a yard to a still fairly good size, but no yard townhouse in a neighborhood we'd always wanted to live in. And we love it. We love it. We love the other place too, but we love it. And at the time, I really had to mentally adjust what I was thinking, because I kept thinking people would think I needed to downsize because I didn't have the money or something like that, which was not the case. Isn't it funny how we somehow think we should spend in a certain way because of what we think other people think, which is
Again, yeah, the shoulds and the judgment and that nagging voice that's in the back of your head.
exactly
It's so powerful these days. And then, once you go through that kind of initial exercise and look at how you've been spending your money compared to your values, going forward, it's a matter of just kind of keeping an eye on your monthly spending in some of those specific categories that you either want to reduce or increase. So maybe using an app. Some people are like the You Need a Budget or Mint or something like that, not to, drag you down and track every single penny and look at it every night and make sure it's okay, but checking in a couple times a month real quick. There's some credit cards and banks that offer some kind of summary tools that can also help if your spending is kind of within the same company. That is also a great free option for people as well, that doesn't feel quite as overwhelming as some of those
right.
apps do too.
So for the apps, I confess I have not used an app. That's probably just my age group. But can they be set up so that they get transactions directly from your credit card or your bank or whatever, and you can just have a look?
Yes. Yep. You can link it to usually a couple different credit card bank accounts to kind of collect it all. And often people will start to use them and feel a little overwhelmed by it just because of all the things that they ask you to track. So even if you narrow that down and just pick a few of those kind of tempting areas to overspend, eating out, shopping, Target, Amazon, entertainment, things like that. Groceries is another one that I like to recommend people keep an eye on, just because it tends to be a larger expense. So that you're just looking at 4 or 5 budget categories on a regular basis. You're not looking at 20, because generally your utilities don't really change all that much. Your car insurance doesn't really change all that much. So don't bother tracking it that closely. Update it once a year when it changes and move on and focus on other areas that are a lot more variable.
That's a really good idea, because your rent's probably not changing. As you said, utilities might go up and down a little, but not a lot. And yeah, good point. Good point. Maybe it seems a little easier. Okay. Don't you wish sometimes that living well had a set of easy steps to follow, or maybe a handbook for success? There are certainly many books out there that help, but wouldn't we love some easy tips that we can try right now? I've created for you 7 days of easy, free tips for living well. We're talking about sleep, food, movement, mindset, and a lot more. Even if you pick a few of these suggestions and give them a try, you will be starting down a path to amazing change over time. Make sure to go to www.bit.ly/OMG Teach Me podcast and sign up for your 7-day journey with me. So let's talk about some special cases then. What if somebody is listening and they're dealing with a lot of debt that they need to try to figure out how to get their way out of, and they're trying to make a budget? Do you have any tips for that?
Yes, and this is one of the most common questions we're getting these days as we approach the student loan payment restart. The first thing that I recommend is making sure that you know the minimum monthly payment of what your debt is and that is set up on auto pay every single month so that you know without a doubt the minimum payments being made and you're not getting late fees, missed payment fees, anything like that. The decision of whether or not to pay off a debt beyond the minimum payment is complex and personal to a lot of people. There's 100 different social media voices telling you 100 different things. Some saying pay off debt as soon as possible at any interest rate. Some saying you can earn more in the stock market, so pay off debt slowly and invest in retirement. My answer to that question is very much it depends. It depends on who you are, what debt and savings you have, and then what your priorities are. Some people, the weight of debt is really heavy for some people, and so getting that paid off as soon as possible can make a big difference for you. But my general recommendation for people is if you have room in your budget or your monthly spending for extra, the first thing I recommend you do is save up to the match for your retirement. So contribute to your retirement account at work where your employer contributes something like 3% of your salary if you contribute 3% of your salary, or they're all different and they're all worded a little differently, but there's usually some percentage of your salary that they'll contribute if you do at least that amount.
Right.
And that's essentially free money because if you put in $100, they put in $100, you now have $200 that's in your retirement account that's going to grow over and over again until you retire. So we really don't want you to miss out on that.
That's a great point.
Once you've done that, then the next step is kind of looking at, okay, do we want to pay off some debt? Do we want to save a little more for the future in some way, shape, or form? Kind of the next tier of evaluating where you're at is looking at a level of kind of an emergency fund. If something were to happen, could you come up with $1,000, couple $1,000, if your car had an issue or if your pet had an issue or something like that. So having a little bit of cash on hand and working towards an amount that you feel comfortable with maybe helps you sleep a little better at night. That's kind of the next priority in this hierarchy. And once you have that, where you're comfortable with a level of an emergency fund, then start looking at your high interest debt. So maybe credit card debt, or if you have private student loans that are over 10%, that's kind of roughly the number I look for prioritizing paying down that debt that really does grow quickly. And then from there, you have lots of options. Once your high interest is paid off, that's when you can really start to throw money either at lower interest debt or add to your retirement account for future, or grow your emergency fund in case you think maybe your job's a little unstable or you want to make a career change. But going through that debt journey and paying off, especially if you have large amounts like student loans, it can feel like such a long and tedious process that I always recommend people break it down into smaller goals. And as you reach those goals, celebrate. Do something completely ridiculous. Throw yourself a party, a reasonable party.
Don't get yourself back into debt.
Yeah, I'm not saying like the whole neighborhood, but treat yourself to a nice dinner one night. Something to acknowledge that, hey, I paid off $5,000 worth of debt and I may still have $45,000 to go, but that $5,000 is an incredible accomplishment. Don't gloss over that just because there is still a hill to climb. You've already made significant progress.
Yes. And I just am going to add to that because I know someone who recently, a few years ago, finished paying off her student loans. And she did mention, oh, I finally finished paying off my student loans. And I was like, wow, yay, that's so exciting. And she was kind of like, is it? I guess it is. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I agree, celebrate, because it feels sort of like, oh, I had this thing hanging over me and now it's gone, thank goodness. But celebrating changes it a little bit.
Yeah. So some people I know have made, back in school, when you counted down to the end of the year, they made paper chains. And so every time you pay off $100, you rip one of the links of the chains off or color in a box on a piece of graph paper, just those things, because so much of finances is mental. And so doing those things to kind of give your brain that dopamine hit and keep yourself motivated over the long haul so that you don't get burned out and decide to just say, oh, well, I'll never pay this off. Keep your brain and your mind engaged in this process and give yourself some of those encouragements to keep going, because it is a long and tedious process.
Yeah, it is. I had student debt from grad school. I know so many people have it. Or credit card debt, you mentioned. Those are maybe, if I had to guess, those would be the two biggest categories that people deal
Yes.
with.
Hmm.
Yeah. Putting aside mortgages, because of course we know probably we have a mortgage. Well, that is really helpful. I'm not sure I even followed that advice when I was paying off my debt, but it is really helpful.
Now you can throw parties for all your friends when they tell you that they paid off student loans.
Exactly. We know it's a big deal. And I mean, it is a big deal. I feel like it's just something maybe we don't realize is a thing to celebrate, which is kind of what
Mhm.
you were saying. Yeah.
And yeah, like you said before, there's so much shame around finances and even more so about debt, like the bad word of debt. And so people don't talk about having it and it feels weird to celebrate. But I
Right.
mean, you don't have to post it on Facebook for the world to know, but even telling one trusted person that you reached this goal or you passed a milestone can really take it far in that the emotional piece of tackling a mountain of debt that so many of us
I
have gone
agree.
through.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I like that. Yeah, you don't have to post it on Facebook. Can if you want, I'm sure people would cheer you on if you did.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so let's also talk about another category that maybe creates a little bit of complication with budgeting. And I don't know exactly how you're going to answer this. I guess that's why I'm asking, but this is quite a broad question. So, what if someone is going through some type of major life change? And I suppose that could be a million things. It could be getting married, it could be getting divorced, it could be having kids, it could be starting a different job, all sorts of things. What do you have any advice for them in that phase?
Yeah. And that's usually where we see a whole lot of clients come to us because they're like, well, I understood my finances in my role as a single person, but now I'm getting married and he does finances weird. And I don't know how to communicate that my way and his way. And anyway, so the first thing we do is start by just getting a whole lot of clarity on where you're at and what's going to change going forward. So if it is combining finances, it's kind of a time to get a little, who says it? Somebody uses the phrase financially naked with somebody, but it is a time to
Ooh.
kind of put it all out there, your assets, your debt, your spending, your income, so that both parties are aware of what all is going on. If it's something like a job change or moving, it's, looking at and projecting what's my new income going to be? What are my new expenses going to be? A little bit of it's guessing and kind of playing the what if game, but just taking the time to get really clear on where you are currently at, which we've already done in the budgeting conversation, and you should be spot on.
Yep.
And then what's going to change going forward with those numbers and the situation. And from there, that can help give you a whole lot of information if, okay, well, I used to be able to make ends meet on a monthly basis, but with this change, my income's going to go down and now I can't afford all of the things that I did before. So what areas am I going to cut? Am I going to maybe reduce my retirement contribution or not pay off any debt any faster, anything beyond the minimum amount? Am I going to reduce my spending in some way, get a roommate? Once you have that information, you can then start to look at, okay, how do I make these changes so that my budget, my income supports my lifestyle and continues to allow me to move towards the goals that I'm working towards.
Right.
And I think the other thing that I see a lot with big life changes is don't be afraid to cancel or stop paying for things that just don't fit in the lifestyle that you currently have. I see people all the time that have emotional attachments to their gym membership that they are not currently using. Maybe it changed and they're now doing yoga, but they won't give up the weightlifting gym from 5 years ago or the gym from where they grew up and they now live halfway across the country, things like that. So you can always re-sign up and rejoin, but in the meantime, you'll be saving money each month, not paying that.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm thinking, wow, the gym where they grew up, but I could see how that would happen. You just sort of lose track of it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I've noticed that I am not always good about is realizing even what I've subscribed to online.
Mm-hmm.
And it's $5, it's $9, it's $15, whatever, but all those could add up, right? And so we need to make sure that we're aware, I guess this goes back to the original
Mm-hmm.
point of what's actually happening, because maybe we're not using those things anymore.
Yeah, subscriptions are so sneaky these days and they come up in all areas of life. It used to just be like streaming and that was all, but now it's a subscription to get DoorDash and a subscription for newspaper and for cooking recipes. And I like to recommend that my clients once a year go through and take a look at what they're being charged every month for those kinds of subscriptions and make sure that they are still getting value from that. If you subscribe to the New York Times, but you don't know your password, you can't remember the last time you logged in, are you really getting value from that subscription? Or maybe you let it go for 6 months and try it again down the road.
Right. And you make a good point. They're always going to let us back. They always are going to want us back.
And not just let you back, they will welcome you with open arms. They are thrilled to have you come back. They might even offer you a discount to come back.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So it's okay to cancel things. And then, I mean, if you decide that you miss it, then down the road, resubscribe.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so sneaky, all the different things. And as you said, if we just sat down and looked at our bank account or our, I don't know, PayPal or our wherever it is
Yeah.
and looked through a whole month, I think we would maybe catch things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when you're sharing finances with somebody else, sometimes someone else will subscribe to something on Patreon and you'll be like, oh, well, I just assumed it was something you were watching regularly. And they'll be like, oh, well, I forgot about it. And yet you've been very nicely supporting this person on Patreon that neither of you guys are watching
Right.
for the last 6 months. So doing that exercise together, if you're sharing finances with someone, is best.
Excellent point. Yeah, because sometimes it's hard to even figure out what it is. So you kind of need
Mhm.
both of you to talk about it. You're
Yeah.
right. So, okay, tell me if we missed anything that is a tip that somebody really needs to know with budgeting, or do you think we kind of got the full basics?
I think we have a lot of the basics. I think really focusing on people's kind of that voluntary choice level spending versus the fixed spending that happens is really the place that if you are going to dive into budgeting a little bit, that you should focus your efforts on, and not get overwhelmed by trying to track every single penny each month, but focus on those areas you know yourself. Focus on the areas that are tempting for you. Some people walk into Target and walk out with the one thing that was on their list. Other people need a moving van to get themselves home
Yeah,
from
I'm
Target
like, I don't know who those
every
people
time.
are.
Yeah. So, just, knowing yourself in a non-judgmental way and focusing on those areas that are more challenging for you to kind of rein in.
I really like how you're saying this. And listeners, you'll hear a theme in many podcast episodes throughout this fall about kind of figuring ourselves out in a non-judgmental way, because I feel like I just saw this on Instagram. Somebody was saying we live in such a judgmental world, and we do, and we don't even do it maybe on purpose or to be mean. Sometimes we just want to catalog and categorize things, and so when we do it to ourselves, it doesn't help anything. So I like this angle.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell us, how can people, if they want to connect with you to find out more or maybe to work with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so Fearless Finance is on all of the social media sites that we can possibly be on. I say there's links to those down in the show notes. So give us a follow and take a look at the finance tips that we post on social media. And then we also have a team of 6 financial planners that are available to work with you guys on a one-on-one basis. We are located all over the US, but we meet with all of our clients via Zoom so that we can work with anyone anywhere on their finances. So as part of a promotion for being on this podcast, because I'm so thankful to be here,
Yay!
we'll give you $50 off your first meeting with us to work together and come up with an initial financial plan. It usually takes about 2, maybe 3 meetings, 3 hour-long meetings to come up with a financial plan for people and work through some of these different things like spending, repaying debt, the
Right.
terrifying budget word, and also looking at, investing for the future, taking advantage of what employee benefits you have. We also talk about estate planning and insurance needs so that if something does happen to you, that people who depend on you are protected financially in the case that you lose an income or are no longer able to earn an income. So we do work, one-on-one with people, and part of what we do, we're called a fiduciary financial planner. So we don't earn any commissions, kickbacks, affiliates from anything we recommend. We get to know you and we make recommendations for your finances based on your personal values, goals, things like that, and our expertise. So it's trustworthy. There's no benefit to us for the things we recommend. They're just the best products that we found for our clients.
Yeah, I having done various financial planning meetings with different people over the years, I really like this aspect of Fearless Finance. So I will give you that plug for sure. I feel like we kind of know that you're recommending what you really think is a good idea. So that's important. So yes, listeners, you get to use the code TEACHME to get this $50 off if you decide to make an appointment with someone at Fearless Finance. So thank you, Fearless Finance, for that. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can there's a contact us form on the website down below, and you can just enter that in the promo code and go get connected with one of us financial planners.
Perfect. Okay, so now the very most important question, not really, but the fun question
Yes.
is, I think our listeners know by now, we have a mood lift playlist on Spotify and now on Amazon Music as well. So tell me, what is your favorite song to listen to when you need to put yourself in a better mood?
I love this idea, and I have thought about this for a couple of days and kind of went back and forth, but I'm going to settle on my original gut of Stronger by Kelly Clarkson.
Oh, fantastic one.
Yes.
We don't have that on the list yet. I love it. I can hear it in my head as soon as you said it. Awesome. Okay, so you'll see the link to the playlist down below as well, and all of the information that Katie talked about. So, Katie, thank you so much. I really love your angle on this. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad to be here, and I can't wait to hear next week your guest on mindset related to finance. I think that'll be so fun to dive into.
Yes, and thank you for that, because I meant to say that at the end. So this week was, okay, the how, maybe we could think about it. Next week, we're going to dig into all the weird mental stuff that is often attached to money. So put together, both of these, I think, are going to be very helpful for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. OMG, I would be so honored if you would take a moment, leave a rating, leave a review, or take a screenshot and share on your social media. Let's get this message out further into the world. Now it's time to head down to the show notes to see the resources I mentioned. We may not have learned this before, but it sure is powerful now.